Max Heinemeyer, welcome to the podcast.
Rob, thanks for having me.
I was going to ask you how Black Hat was. Then I remembered the golden rule about that place.
I think you mean the golden rule about Vegas, right? Not Black Hat in specific.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was good as every year. Let's keep it at that.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas unless you're on a podcast, right?
Exactly.
So speaking of Black Hat, they had a very nice intro of you. So Max is a cybersecurity expert with over a decade of experience in the field, specializing in a wide range of areas such as penetration testing, red teaming, CM and SOC consulting, and last but not least, hunting advanced persistent threats. He works in the R&D team at Darktrace, shaping research into new AI innovations and their various defensive and offensive applications. And Max's insights are regularly featured in international media outlets such as the BBC, Forbes, and Wired. And I'm sure next year they will have to add the mnemonic security podcast, right? And you have both a bachelor and a master's degree from two different colleges, neither of which I will try to pronounce, but they sound German.
That is correct. Yeah. They do sound German. They are German.
Cool. So my first question to you, how did you go from pen tester to a chief product officer? Because that's a big jump. Or it's a very different...
It's a journey.
Yeah, it's a journey.
When I was a pen tester, I really enjoyed my work. Anybody who's done hacking and pen testing knows that flush of power and that feeling of, wow, I can achieve this with my team. And that's amazing. But I noticed then when I came back 6 months later, maybe a year later, to the same customers, the vulnerabilities were still there. They didn't manage to fix or mitigate them. Or sometimes we found similar vulnerabilities that got missed the first time and new tools got developed or new exploits got developed. And I really scratched my head and think, well, I came into this industry being taught that this type of manual penetration testing and this type of red teaming is necessary and a very important step to secure business. But what I felt like is that it didn't have an impact. Yeah. That what we did was feeling good and, it's a well-paid job and everybody says this is the way. But it didn't really move the needle, is what I felt. So I started to question some of these best practices. I'm not saying pen testing is bad, but I think cybersecurity as an industry is evolving so quickly and is such a young field that we haven't settled in what best practice looks like. So long story short, I got frustrated with not feeling an impact being a pen tester of really moving the needle for the industry. So I looked around what other interesting solutions are out there, what other interesting technologies out there, who's going against the stream, who's got novel ideas, who's tackling the problem of cyber from a different angle. And while everybody back in the day said, well, this is the way to create security monitoring. If you want to find hackers, you have to create this big CM system, you have to hire 20 experts in the field, you have to spend 3 years of tuning, and then you got a chance to do it. And I used to be a consultant in that field, and like pen testing, I scratched my head and thought, well, maybe if you're a big bank or insurance company, you can have an attempt at this. Even there, it's very difficult, just between us and our listeners. But how can a medium or small-sized company ever aspire to do that, right? That's never going to work. So I knew how easy it is to attack, and I know how difficult it is to defend. So I looked around, found Darktrace, who was back then, that was 2014, 2015. I joined in 2016 myself, this company, who were looking at applying machine learning back in the day already to cybersecurity problems. And they turned the paradigm on its head, where they said, well, let's not try to define every rule and every threat and every signature and try to anticipate every possible attack. Let's instead learn the business. And as soon as a deviation occurs, we can flag that, detect the anomaly, do something with that. So that really intrigued me as a hacker. And I thought, how would I beat that system? And I looked around and I was interacting a lot with the vendorscape at the time, and this struck me as a very unique and different approach. And it still is. I mean, everybody and their grandmother now speaks about AI and is having AI chatbots, but this was revolutionary at the time and is still very different to many other AI approaches. So how did I become the CPO? I started there as a senior analyst. So I literally sat in the trench and looked at threats through Darktrace. I looked at networks and all kinds of, probably over 2,000 organizations hands-on myself, and found every threat under the sun through our technology. And over time, I was very invested in this. You can hear me speak full of passion, right? I think this is genuinely something good we do to push the boundaries of technology here. So I got very enthusiastic and wanted to speak about it more and want to work with our big customers. And naturally, people kept elevating me higher and higher to speak to more people until eventually, after 8.5 years now, I'm the CPO, but I've been in this role for 2-ish years now.
I love it, Max. That's an awesome story. Did you have like an aha moment at some point in your career when you were like, okay, this, that's one of the things I want to talk about today is just untangling the AI term. I'm not sure if that helped Darktrace or if it actually has hurt you because it makes it more even more confusing about what you're actually doing. But like if you can think back in time, like what was the moment where you're like, wow, this is actually a novel, smart way of going about security monitoring? Did you remember that moment in time?
Yes. So there's a bunch of questions in your question, so I'm going to deconstruct that if that's okay.
Get used to it. That's how I speak for some reason. Sorry.
It's perfect. I love it so much. So there were several aha moments, I would say. I want to talk about one or two of them in a second, and then also touch on that AI washing almost what's happening in the industry. I think about the machine learning applications in cybersecurity in particular in three big buckets. The first one being, which everybody knows about, the natural language assistants that are popping up everywhere, which is implementing similar LLMs, large language models to ChatGPT, and everybody's just bolting that on their applications. We're very dubious of how much of benefits this actually brings and how much it's still hype. I think that still has to be proven in the industry. The second big thing is supervised machine learning, which mostly refers to threat detections. When we speak about monitoring, refers to looking across your customer base, taking threat examples, bad phishing emails, SQL injection examples, malware examples, could be anything really, exploits, pushing them into your big cloud system with supervised algorithms and training your system on these historic attacks. So in the future, your defensive system can find similar attacks. It has that body of knowledge, but it always needs to have retraining, it needs to collect the data. That approach, that supervised threat-based detection, is better than what we had 5 years ago, which was very manual, static rules and signatures based. Those two things are not really what we do. We don't have an AI chatbot at Darktrace. We don't use a big cloud system to train on customer threats. We use a third, much more niche application in the industry, which is predominantly based on unsupervised machine learning, but also various other components. We call it self-learning, where we do not train on big natural language data. We do not train on historic attack data. We train on customers' business data. And this comes now finally to your question about my aha moment, the first one. What we do actually is we look at a customer's environment. This could be their network environment, could be their cloud, could be their email, could be their identity, could be their factory, could be any kind of data. Darktrace sits in the environment. We do not take the data to a cloud. The learning happens on site from scratch. It's like a child that learns to walk and understands for the first time. So the system is not pre-trained to know what one bank looks like to then understand the other bank. It is literally learning from scratch what the groups look like, what normal communications patterns mean, who's interacting with whom, what language is being used, what data is being shifted, what external services are being used, how rare is what, who behaves similarly. All of these things, all of the time, continuously. And that is what called me, like I explained earlier, to come to Darktrace. And my first aha moments were when I was a senior analyst at Darktrace, when I started seeing my first nation-state attackers through our system, where we deployed in some random companies, sometimes government, sometimes defense, sometimes energy, and we plug Darktrace in, let it sit there for a week to learn, and then you start seeing there's this one desktop that is scanning the network the whole time, and it's writing PowerShell files with a local admin credential that is also used on the domain controller to the domain controller, and the malware being used was never seen before. The command and control domains that were used had never been used before, legitimate compromised websites, when used living off the land. It's literally the worst case that is extremely difficult. You as a practitioner know, how would you predict that? How would you write a rule or a malware signature or an EDR detection that is not constantly overfiring but pinpoints this? So my first big aha moments were when I worked as an analyst and I saw these environments and I literally saw nation-state level attacks flashing up as anomaly chains, not predefined, not, having seen other customers, as the most obvious thing that even a junior analyst could pick up, understand, and action immediately. It's not a silver bullet, right? I speak very passionately about this. No single solution is in the industry, but that approach to turn this on its head is super powerful for reducing alert fatigue because the system keeps learning, for not having to predefine everything, so finding new threats, and also for getting internal context. But I stop here because I could ramble on for hours, but you asked me about my aha moment, and these first ones where I saw this work in practice, hands-on myself, that just blew my mind completely.
So basically you saw the anomalies popping up, and at that time, did it like piece it all together for you, or is that your job as an analyst still at that time to sort of, okay, that's weird, let me...
Yeah, back in the day when I joined, our system was flagging up those anomalies and sometimes combining them. So I would see Rob's laptop, and Darktrace says, well, first thing Rob did was, download these weird files from GitLab, and then 2 hours later, Rob did some weird PSExec movement to another device, and then Rob did some weird beaconing to this German website. So me as an analyst, I would then read that, and within seconds I know that looks pretty bad. And I know the story, I dig in, I might write a report. Then actually we thought about how can we push the boundaries, because what we just discussed, what I explained, is mainly tackling the problem of threat detection, right? How do I find a novel, a targeted attack, an insider threat, a supply chain attack, an end day, a 0 day, something like this without predefining it? It's very hard, but that's what we tackled. And then we thought, well, we have human analysts who write this up and, flag it and identify it. And it was rather straightforward, but you still needed some level of human interaction. So we thought about how can we make this easier? How can we replicate what we do as human analysts here in a machine learning system? So when I started, that was literally my job, what I explained, looking at these details and stitching the narrative together. And then we thought, could we create an AI analyst? Could we replicate these human intuition workflows, cognitive efforts in some level of automated system using machine learning or other techniques? And what we did is we literally observed our internal analyst team with their consent anonymized by using various techniques, but also a Chrome plugin that actually looked at how is Max using the system. When Max sees a network scan that is conducted by Rob, does Max first look at the source device and understand what the source device does? Or does Max first look at the ports that are being touched? Or does Max first look at the data transfers? Or does Max look at what happened before this network scan happened, right? That's the hypothesis, the cognitive work that we observed quantitatively for several months around across dozens and dozens of experienced analysts to understand how they actually conduct their workflows. And then we took these learnings and rebuilt that in a system. So what we did there is we didn't stop by saying, here's an interesting chain of anomalies and go and figure it out. We now have a system that is triggered every time an anomaly pops up, that AI analyst that's running locally as well in real time and says, like Max would, great, that looks like a network scan. What could this be? A bit hypotheses, could this be data exfiltration, part of a kill chain, lateral movement, legitimate admin activity? Then it gathers data based on context and it evaluates that data based on various previous training data and machine learning systems to come to a conclusion. So we really try to replicate a lot of the level 1 and 2 human SOC team workflows where you do not have to sift through anomalies and triage and put a story together. Now, instead of looking at 70 anomalies in 2 weeks, you might have a single incident which is fully narrated, which tells you exactly what happened, what kill phases were, what the local reasons were, and the next steps you should be taking. Again, nothing is a silver bullet, but this is meant to help you hire different types of people. Right now, you don't need a Max Heinemeyer with 15 years of network security forensic analysis, but you could use maybe 1 or 2 junior analysts who come out of uni and understand your environment better. So that's the whole goal, right? The whole goal is make this more accessible, lower the barrier to entry, make this more affordable, and let's not try to widen the skill gap. But yeah, circling the boomerang back all the way to your question, I guess. That was my job, but I think we pushed the boundaries of trying to recreate a lot of that human workflow in machine learning systems.
That's awesome. I was actually looking up on YouTube, I watched one of your videos, and it was talking about self-learning and unsupervised machine learning, and it was going through a combination of methods. It says Bayesian, probabilistic methods, deep neural networks, graph theory, GANs. You have so many things going on underneath the hood. So one of the things I noticed this week, I was with your colleagues here and also lovely team you have, awesome time. And I realized that there was lots of different definitions and just there's not a common understanding of all these different things. So I'm not going to ask you to explain, all these different methods, but what conversations do you usually have with people that are trying to understand? What do you think are the most useful analogies for them to place this in their head?
Yeah, I love your question there because I speak about how our tech works every single day to big audiences or on a podcast or to practitioners or machine learning data scientists or CISOs. And honestly, I think one of the tricks is to make it very simple to use, even if you're not a data scientist, right? So while there are sometimes people who need to understand the intricate details, like how is this specific beaconing detector working and how can we test it? Can we adjust it somehow? And is it prone to any model fatigue or any data poisoning? A lot of that, although it's getting a lot of attention in our industry, like the security of AI systems, it is in practice often not relevant for 99% of organizations. Yeah. So much, right? Yeah. I mean, I can go in a second into some of the deep machine learning details, but what's more important often is the outcomes and the applicability and how you can use it in your environment. So when we speak to customers, they often don't need to understand or don't want to understand if it's GANs that are being used, or if it's specific types of unsupervised machine learning, or if there's a meta classifier. They sometimes ask if they have tried to build something like Darktrace themselves and failed after several years with a big team of data scientists, because it's a very, very hard problem. And then they want to see how we tackle the problem. But for most organizations, they need to know, can I tune it somehow? Can I apply it? Is it real time? How precise is it? What does the analyst do? Do I need to be aware of any micro attack mappings? Like, it's more a combination of domain knowledge and output and efficiency than knowing exactly how the machine learning works. The important bit is, and the interesting bit, if I think to the supervised machine learning systems that train on historic attack data and say this looks like local privilege escalation because we have seen 1 million privilege escalations in other customers and we think this is one in your environment, that is a very different story, because that is quite prone to misfiring and false positives, because, that big model often doesn't quite fit for a specific environment because everybody's different. And then you really need to understand, if you want to tune that model, why did it fire exactly? What parameters went sideways? How can we adjust this? Can we trust it? Can we red team it to test the detection or detection engineer? Whereas we say, right, we turn it around. We don't say we've seen this attack 20 times before, therefore we alert your environment. We say, well, Rob is using some communication and data transfers to mega upload, which he normally doesn't do. And we can show exactly your normal behavior, your normal data flows, which protocols you use, which cloud systems you use, because that's all in your environment. So to your question, do people need to know? Do they want to know? How deep do they go? It depends on their job and if it impacts their work. And it does impact their work actually as detection engineers, because they need sometimes to adjust the detections, they need to turn some off, they need to create new ones. And luckily, because we built the system to also use it internally, we live on Darktrace and a few other things within our company in security, everything can be adjusted. So there's no black box AI model that just gives you a score and you have to live or die with it. So I think most people don't need to know a lot of the details, but more the value. But if your job role requires you to do some intricate work, we can usually go down to that level of detail.
I assume so. One thing I just wanted to touch on there, you said like those that have failed. I know that big banks out there will have, huge detection engineering teams that'll be like looking at individual log sources and making baselines. My question to you is, what do they usually fail at? Like, where do they usually quit?
Yeah, data richness, real timeness, and also the amount of different machine learning methods they use. And what I mean by that is, you often see an existing SecOps team that is struggling with too many alerts, so they want to add some anomaly detection afterwards. And there's a lot of systems that naturally cater for that, like Splunk has built-in anomaly detectors for specific metadata or specific net flows, and you have to tune it a bit and you have to feed certain things in. But if you want to get to the point where you are extremely precise and you're not false positiving all the time, you need to look really at the depth of detail. So you can't just look at metadata and all experience. We want to see the packet inspector data down to OSI layer 7. If we look at emails, we need to see the content to understand and analyze the language, for example, to understand syntax and grammar and specific intonations and stuff like that. So one reason why many people fail is because they say, okay, I'm going to set up this project where I want to detect beaconing anomalies in HTTPS, and they only look at net flow data and don't look at lower level data, don't look at maybe the types of encryption that are being used, don't look at surrounding behavior, because the other problem is the power sits in the chaining of anomalies together. A single anomaly itself might not be very interesting, but you need to combine them. So if the project in a company, in a detection team is, just find me an anomaly for beaconing, that is almost doomed to fail, either on the level of data quality and data depth they use, or because they only bolt it on top and don't have all of the surrounding tiny anomalies. Because a specific weird beaconing indicator might be not interesting if that's all that happens, but if there's 15 other anomalies, your data transfer was slightly different, there were 2 weird admin logins 20 minutes before, there was an unusual Microsoft Defender alert an hour before, all of a sudden that one beaconing anomaly becomes extremely interesting. And you need that richness of context and the level of ability to use meta-level classifiers to balance these ones out without overfiring, to make sure you don't swamp your team with false positives or non-interesting alerts.
All right.
And then, of course, you often have a dedicated data engineering or data science team that builds these classifiers and machine learning systems, but your consumers are SOC people level 1 to 3 analysts. that need visual tools to pivot around the data, that need this in context of the existing tooling, that don't want yet another screen. So it's not just the data science problem, it's also the applicability and usability of the system. And of course, that's what we've been working on for 11 years with, very rich UI that's very visual and everything there. So I would say that's the main reasons why these projects tend to fail. And it's not for lack of, trying and resource. It's just a very hard problem.
I'm just thinking one thing you said you don't use, the big cloud. You don't send the customer data up to the big cloud and does analysis and send it back down, right? It's all happening in their environment. How do you push all that smartness from the big cloud and the know-how of these attacks and things that are known to be weird? Because I'm assuming you still kind of have to have that to make. You have to have some understanding of what bad is.
Not on a level to redetect that. So that is one of the clever bits, right? To make all of the things I just described, do this anomaly chaining, that real-time detection, that real-time learning and understanding of an environment, even if we've never seen it before, happen locally if we need to. Because if you send all of this into the cloud, all of the network traffic, all of the emails, do analysis there and send it back down, you create a big supply risk problem possibly, because who wants all of the network traffic going to a third party these days? You might create time bottlenecks in case of ransomware, encryption, data exfiltration. If that takes even a minute to set all of the data up, do analysis, come back down, that's unacceptable, we think. And a few other problems. So we managed to engineer that down to a level where it does work locally, and we do not feed our system with consequent updates of, this is a new threat, this is a new anomaly. It literally learns from scratch and then puts together these anomalies. And of course, when we pour over which MITRE techniques might apply to this, or that this looks like potential DNS tunneling because it's a significant anomaly in outbound DNS traffic that really strongly deviates. So there is domain context around this, but it's not specifically matching a specific threat, if that makes sense. So we do not need that constant cloud connection. That's why we also run in offline environments on cruise ships sometimes, in government facilities with 100% efficacy, not losing any of our capabilities.
In regards to use cases, are there certain use cases that are just better suited for your way of doing things compared to others? Or is signature-based detection better in some things, or if you understand the question? I don't even understand the question I'm asking anymore. I'm in deep water here, but I'm hoping you can untangle them for me.
As long as your audience takes something away and has fun.
They listen to you, hopefully, instead of me.
Good. No, I'm not saying that. So what's I guess, benefits, or where's the traditional approach better? Should you take one or the other? I don't think there's a specific answer. This is not, binary where one is always better in this situation, the other is always worse. What I would say is that most companies have quite mature what we call known threat detection, stuff that's based on signatures and known threats, your antivirus, your Microsoft Defender, your firewalls. So you're pretty well covered. But the thing that is causing the disruption is the 1%, which is unpredictable, the targeted spear phishing, the living off the land attack, the stuff that is very, very hard to pinpoint. So we always say you want to have a combination of both approaches. We are Microsoft Partner of the Year in the UK this year, actually.
I saw that, yeah.
Technology partner. You and I, we talked mostly about detecting novel threats. And you said what other use cases are there. I touched on using different machine learning to automate level 1 and 2 analyst roles with an AI analyst. There's another element which has a lot of impact for our customers, which is not detecting or investigating threats, but responding to threats. And there's a trick here that we can do because of the deep understanding of an environment, by not just responding in saying we have to predefine the response, quarantine a device, or we have to predefine the response, just let it go because it's a critical business server, we can't interact. We actually can do context and behavioral-based reactions. And that is a significant, very useful benefit when you want to contain a threat but not interrupt the business. As an example, when Log4j happened, the big vulnerability that everybody knows about, we saw a lot of exploit campaigns a few hours after the news dropped, hitting internet-facing devices of some of our customers. What we did not do is, we did not start to scramble to analyze these attacks and, create routes and signatures to stop these attacks. It was just another day in the office. What we saw for Darktrace doing, we saw, as an example, an internet-facing VPN server of one of our customers. Log4j hit it, wanted to start downloading malware and wanted to scan the network and do Bitcoin mining or whatever. Darktrace said, well, all of a sudden we've learned that your VPN server is normally receiving SSL connections from a lot of different people, and it's downloading updates from, let's say, Cisco, and it's getting administered over SSH on port 22. That's kind of what it normally does, based on your environment, based on your device. Now, all of a sudden, it's connecting back to this weird Chinese server all the time, and it's trying to reach out to your finance server, and it's trying to Bitcoin mine and download files from GitLab. So Darktrace 8 pointed all of this out. The analyst put it all together in a single incident in real time, saying something is really bad and wrong with your VPN server. It doesn't make any business sense. We didn't say careful with Log4j because nobody knew it had given a name yet. Right at that point, it was an NDA. And now comes the trick. Darktrace, in those customers where it's enabled, responded autonomously, not by saying, haha, I've seen this 10,000 times, therefore I know exactly what to do. It said, well, I know your VPN server normally gets a lot of incoming SSL on these ports and is reaching out to Cisco and getting connected into over SSH, but it's never beaconing out to this Chinese IP over port 88, which is normally Kerberos internal, not using HTTPS to go to the internet. And it's never trying to upload data to Mega Upload, and it's never trying to Bitcoin mine. So what Darktrace did is, in real time, which means sub-seconds, sub-milliseconds, understand the context and the behavior and stop the beaconing over port 88, because that's super unusual, by interrupting via firewall integration or other means, stopping that potential upload and Bitcoin mining via integrations as well. But let, and this is the very crucial part, the normal business continue.
Right.
So it did not shut down the server and nobody could connect back in and, the whole business grinded to a halt. So you were asking what's the use case for this type of approach? I think for sure it's threat detection, but many people say, well, anomaly detection, so what? But it's much more the deep understanding of an environment where we can also respond surgically by understanding normal behavior and enforcing that in context, in real time, without the human having to predefine every playbook. So that's super powerful, I think.
Yeah, really good use case. But there's one thing you said that I really wanted to touch upon, like living off the land technique. What other unknown sort of things besides living off the land and spearfishing are actually like more things that are good use cases for your way of approaching it, if any?
Yeah, I like to think about difficult to predict attacks. When I say unknown attacks, it's those that are very hard to predefine. So that could be things like permutations of malware where we don't have signatures or roots for, novel type of exploits where there's no IDS IPS signatures, supply chain attacks, so anything that's abusing trust, supply chain attacks like SolarWinds or Okta, for example. It could be very targeted things like spear phishing, 0 days or N days in particular, certain types of living off the land, so anything that's abusing legitimate identities is extremely difficult to find for traditional approaches. But I would say it's absolutely those difficult to predefine, predescribe, or understandable attacks.
And
exactly.
Am I correct to kind of assume that those sort of attacks you just mentioned, those really can't be pinpointed and highlighted in any other way besides the way that you're doing it?
I wouldn't know how. How do you predefine Log4j in specific without describing the behavior around it? How do you and that's the interesting bit, right? I know that other vendors are trying to find things like insider threats or lateral movement abusing identities by, again, summarizing other lateral movement insider threats from their big database of customers, and then generalizing that and pushing it down to their individual customers to find similar attacks again. But that is crazy to me, and I've had many conversations where that approach failed with organizations, because when it says, well, this connection, this RDP connection, that's an insider threat. And it comes from a big cloud model, data model, so you don't have any details why that is. It's been summarized across 10,000 customers, so you can't tune it. And it's very prone to false positiving. And if you say, no, it's just a novel admin that has changed from finance into an administrator role, very rare, but it happens. They gain some new skills and they discover their love for RT, hate finance now. That is legitimate, that's okay. But every time that happens, you as a human team have to go in there and tune it out. If Darktrace says, well, Rob all of a sudden goes from being a smart, charismatic podcast host to being a sysadmin, which is also fine, but he starts to log into many devices over SSH, Darktrace might say, whoa, that is very unusual. Take a look. There was nothing seen before. There was no further attack kill chain, so it's just weird. But if you keep doing this, the first time Darktrace might say it's 100% weird and really unusual, but as you and your peers continue to behave in this way, the next time it happens, Darktrace might say, well, actually now it's just 70% unusual. And if that becomes the new normal, it will go away by itself as an alert. And that is significant because what breaks most backs in a big SOC is not the use case creation, but actually the use case tuning, the swatting out of false positives. And again, this is not a silver bullet I'm describing, but that level, that plateau of false positive spotting that you normally have to do is significantly squashed because the system keeps learning with your business change.
Very interesting. And I know that you've answered this question a million times, but just before I move on, like when it comes to detection engineering, how are you because I could see like the system is just doing all the detection engineering itself, or do you have anybody in Darktrace that's actually influencing detection engineering from the outside, or is it all happening on the box? I know I've asked this before and I've answered it, but just in the...
No. You didn't ask it in that way, so I gave a different answer. You said, are you looking for threats and sharing these threats? Yeah. We're not doing that.
Yeah.
What we do is we look across our customers that allow us to from a model performance perspective. So if we do create a new behavioral detection, which might happen once a month or so, right? It's quite rare actually these days. But we keep an eye across our customers, how these models work and how they perform. So when we push something like this and we see, wow, the DNS tunneling model that we adjusted a bit is now firing a lot across customers, and especially in the finance sector, then we might take a look at those performance indicators and see if there's any way to improve that. But it's not to push down new detections to cover emerging threats. It's more to enhance the performance and the performance of the resources on the local deployments, for example.
Cool. So your detection engineers are, how would you describe them? Like hardcore mathematicians or?
Not even that. That's a beautiful thing. What my detection engineers do, any customer could do. We just do it across our customer base, right? To make sure the fleet is healthy. But actually it's saying things like, well, the DNS tunneling model, because I mentioned it a few times, is looking for an unusual amount of DNS requests in an unusual amount of time from a device that never does it, going to a rare destination on the internet. And then if that's firing too much, you might be able to say, well, maybe also stop it from firing from proxy servers.
Yeah.
Right? Because proxies might do that a lot.
Yeah.
So every customer could do the same thing. And the beauty is you don't have to be a data scientist to do that, right? Any analyst can do it. So there's still a level of detection engineering that customers might want to do, right? Like I said a few times, nothing is a silver bullet. While our system is very efficient, you still might want to disable some detections. You still might want to create some of your own. You still might want to sharpen some. So customers can absolutely do this. And the bigger ones, the more mature ones do it. But I would say the level of effort required to have a functioning Darktrace is significantly reduced compared to a traditional detection engine approach.
When it comes to the market, when you were at Black Hat and you're looking around the floor there, like what comes to your mind? Are your peers in the space? I'm not sure who you can call yourself comparable. Is it like Vectra or what an Extra Hop? I have no idea. But what do you think is the market catching up, or how do you look at the market?
On the very, very broadest, perspective and zooming out, I am quite happy to see that so many people are now looking at machine learning, although it's mostly AI chatbots. But what we needed was more innovation to help with a lot of the pressing problems we have in security operations. So, in generally speaking, I think it's a good thing that more people try to push boundaries on automation. But if you double click on just this space, just on the network, you have to unfold the machine learning because the devil is in the details. And I described to you in intricate detail in your audience how we work, how we do not pre-train, how we learn purely based on the customer's environment. I like to say we learn the business, they learn the breach. So they might be looking at the same traffic. There might be something popping out at the end that looks like detections, but everything else is very different, like the amount of tunability, the level of noise, the precision, the context given, the real-timeness, what's done with these things. So I wouldn't say they are a competitor. And if you look at other spaces, other point areas like email, you might see Abnormal Security, again, a great company, but they also use that approach of supervised learning, trying to get every bad thing from their customers that they see and then generalize it to push it down. That means you have to tread a lot of water to stay still, which we don't have to because our system self-learns. So we're really not concerned with them. We think it's good if there's healthy competition, but honestly speaking, I still think we're the only ones who have a core AI platform that is taking all of this data and truly self-learns in an environment, self-tuning itself.
Have you patented these ways of doing it? Like, why haven't the others sort of caught on and just copied you?
Yeah, well, there's patents, of course, but that's always a tedious legal process. You really have to create this from the ground up. You have to really think about, it's nothing you can vote on. You could also ask me, why doesn't Google just recreate this? Or why doesn't Microsoft just spend $5 billion and recreate a Darktrace? No, you really have to have the AI knowledge and the researchers. And I said earlier that it's a niche area, that's self-learning. probably 90% of machine learning globally in tech is supervised machine learning, like LLMs or transformers or stuff like that. The stuff we're doing is quite niche, so you don't just find these people growing on trees and knowledge around that. But it's not just about the R&D advantage. You really have to architect your data pipelines, your business model, right? We don't want to summarize a lot of things in our big cloud and pump in more logs and get more license cost of those logs. We don't want to drive more intelligence insights from a big data cloud. We just want to protect customers locally with our cool stuff. So you would have to have a very different approach to your business model, how you want to scale your business with data pipelines. You have to do some significant engineering feat to get it so performant that it runs locally, physically or virtually. And that would only be to recreate the detection part. Right? Yeah. Not even the autonomous response, not even the AI analyst, not even things we didn't even speak about, which is with understanding a business so intricately as we do, we can also predict attack paths by saying we know your identities, your social communications, emails, your network, your vulnerabilities via integrations. Now we can predict what local attack paths have the biggest impact on your business. So it's for us not just about detection and response anymore. It's also what else can you do with that self-learned of the business, which could be predicting attacks, attack path modeling, and vulnerability prioritization, or even after an attack, helping a business to get back on their feet. Instead of getting an incident response team in that is writing big playbooks, our machine learning system can tell you what the best steps are to recover after an incident, because it knows your business so intimately. So to your question again, why haven't others recreated this? They would need to start from scratch, not bolt it on anywhere, and really architect it the same way we did in the machine learning, architecture, data pipelines, and business level, and then they would only catch up on our heels. I mean, let's be careful, because I work for Darktrace, right? So, of course, I'm very biased, but I think that's how I think.
So just to wrap this up, like your take on platform versus best of breed, and what's the future of the space?
So what's my take on platform versus best of breed? I think both are legitimate approaches that should be options for companies. Some companies, especially medium to smaller sized ones, might want a platform approach when it comes to their SOC tooling. This could be an XDR-esque approach, it could be a Darktrace-esque approach, it could be a SIEM-SOAR approach, whatever suits them, they have to know. But it's certainly easier to have consolidation and having to deal with less vendors and less hassle and less integrations. I would say in general, we probably have too many niche solutions in cybersecurity for very specific problems. So almost every CISO I talk to says, I've got too many vendors, I've got too many point solutions. I don't want to consolidate to a single platform, but I want to get from 85 to 50 or so. That is the trend I'm hearing and observing. Of course, we cater to that, right? I said earlier, I think we've got several best-of-breed solutions that actually are part of a bigger platform that works together in synergy. So I think driving towards a platform-esque approach is great. I always think you want to have a layered vendor approach. You want to maybe have Microsoft for the known threat defense, and it's baked into your E3 and E5 anyway, and they're doing pretty well these days. And you might want to have a Darktrace for the stuff you cannot predefine, work in conjunction, and maybe you want to have one or two other solutions for more edge case problems. But having 80 or so vendors, I don't think that's manageable. So I welcome the consolidation in the space. There's some interesting financing on that. If you think back to 2021 times, VC money was very cheap, and we saw such an influx of Israeli and Silicon Valley security companies that often solved a specific, very tiny problem, but were competing for budget and mind space. And there were so many of them that was really difficult. It still is for CISOs, I think, but back then it was even more difficult because there were so many zombie companies, but were never becoming profitable anyway, or never had a reason to exist, but were inflated by VC money, keeping them alive over their lifetime, I think. So I think there's more complexities in the space of too many vendors and stuff like that. But I think if best of breed is more applicable to you as a big business because you have a big in-house engineering team that wants to integrate themselves, that's also absolutely fair game. So I think both work. It depends on the circumstances.
Cool. Well, Mr. Heinemeyer, you are a very smart man. I can tell that. I gave you a very, what I thought were complicated questions, but you made it sound very simple. I really appreciate you explaining Darktrace to me and to our listeners. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I just want to say thank you. I'm genuinely grateful for having the chance to speak to you and hopefully contribute to something for your listeners. If anybody wants to connect and have a chat, I'm on LinkedIn as Maximilian Heinemeyer. Just hit me up and we can have a talk.
Thank you so much, sir. Enjoy your weekend when that time comes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.